It's Global News and Zoom on Nigeria. Thanks for joining me. On the news, Russian warplane mistakenly bombs Belgorod. Indian court acquits all accused in Naroda Gam massacre. 5 Indian soldiers killed in Kashmir attack. French leader meets Xi Jinping in Beijing, and Zelensky addresses Mexican lawmakers, seeks support. A Russian fighter jet accidentally bombed the city of Belgorod, close to the border with Ukraine, the defense ministry in Moscow said. Regional governor Vyacheslav Gladkov said the blast had left a huge crater about 20 meters, 60 feet wide in the city center. 2 women were injured and numerous buildings were damaged. He said an Su-34 fighter bomber jet mistakenly discharged aircraft artillery, the ministry said. The incident took place on Thursday at 22:15 local time, 19:15 GMT. News agency said an investigation is underway. Footages on social media show apartments destroyed by the blast, while one image appears to show a car on the roof of a building. Belgorod, a city of 370,000, is around 25 miles, 40 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. It lies just north of Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, and people there have been living in fear of Ukrainian shelling since the Russian invasion of Ukraine last year. Russian jets also frequently fly over the city on their way to Ukraine. An Indian court has acquitted 68 people accused for the murder of 11 Muslims in the 2002 Gujarat riots. The killings happened after violence broke out in Naroda Gam district of Ahmedabad city in February 28, 2002 rather. Of 86 accused, 17 died and 1 was discharged since the hearing first started in 2009. Those tried in the case included ex-state minister Maya Kodnani and Babu Gajrangi, a former leader of the right-wing Hindu group Bajrang Dal. The judgment was delivered amidst tight security outside the court in Ahmedabad in Gujarat state. Family members of those acquitted welcomed the verdict with chants of Jai Shri Ram, Hail Lord Ram, and Bharat Mata Ki Jai, victory to Mother India, according to reports. Public prosecutor Gaurang Vyas said the prosecution will send the verdict to the state's legal department, which will decide whether or not to appeal in a higher court. A former minister for the ruling BJP, Kodnani, was also an accused in a case in which 97 people were killed in the 2002 riots. She was convicted but later freed by a higher court. The riots in Gujarat left over 1,000 people dead, mostly Muslims. The riots broke out after 60 Hindu pilgrims died in a train fire blamed Muslims in the town of Godhra. The violence was among India's worst outbreaks of unrest. Now, the Indian military has said suspected rebels have killed 5 soldiers in disputed Indian-administered Kashmir when they opened fire and threw explosive at an army truck. The vehicle caught fire due to likely use of grenades, the army said, which were thrown by the unidentified attackers in the southern Rajouri sector on Thursday, close to the highly militarized line of control that divides the Himalayan territory between India and Pakistan. 5 personnel of the Rashtriya Rifles unit deployed for counter-terrorist operations in this area have unfortunately lost their lives in the incident, the Army's Northern Command said in a statement. Another soldier was extremely wounded and taken to a military hospital for treatment, according to the statement. Security forces were searching the area for the attackers. Operations are in progress to locate the perpetrators, the Army said. The Defense Ministry source said Indian Army Chief General Manoj Bhande has briefed Defense Minister Rajnath Singh on the attack. Kashmir is claimed in full but ruled in part by nuclear-armed India and Pakistan. Rebels in the region under India's control have fought some 500,000 Indian soldiers deployed in Indian-administered Kashmir, demanding independence or a merger with Pakistan since 1989. Wrath at New Delhi's rule has increased since 2019 when Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Hindu nationalist government cancelled the partial autonomy of India's only Muslim-majority region. In August last year, suspected rebels raided an Indian army post in Rajouri, killing 3 soldiers. 2 of the attackers also died in the shootout. New Delhi has long accused Pakistan of triggering the rebellion in the Indian-administered part of Kashmir. Islamabad denies that accusation, saying it only provides diplomatic and moral support for Kashmiris seeking self-determination. Tens of thousands of civilians, soldiers and rebels have been killed in the conflict so far. French President Emmanuel Macron stood shoulder to shoulder with Chinese President Xi Jinping for a photo during a state visit to Beijing. The two leaders seemed at ease. Macron appeared to have his hand on Xi's back. Also in the picture and standing slightly apart from the two men was Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, who was visiting China with Macron. The image captured the mood of the trip in an unforeseen display of friendliness between Xi and Macron and a rather cooler reception for von der Leyen. The two European leaders were meant to present a united front to Beijing about its handling of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but instead von der Leyen appeared on the back foot for much of the trip and was even left out of a state banquet. The snub was no doubt the result of a critical speech she made about China-European Union relations shortly before her departure for Beijing. Xi and Macron, in contrast, appeared like old friends. Onlookers in Europe were dismayed when Macron seemed to parrot Xi's talk points and vocabulary during their joint press conference, and when he later seemed to abandon Taiwan, a self-governed democracy claimed by China, when he told reporters Europe must avoid getting dragged into a confrontation between China and the island and keep its distance from any United States-led foreign policy, lest Europe becomes one of America's followers. Instead, he called for the strategic autonomy of Europe. Sana Hashmi, a fellow at the Taiwan Asian Exchange, said his comments did not make much of an impact on Taiwan or in Asia for that matter, given there was never an understanding that major European economies will have a definite role in Taiwan contingency. Beijing considers Taiwan part of its territory and has not ruled out the use of force to take control of the island. In Russia-Ukraine war, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on Mexican legislators to support his country's fight against invading Russian forces, chastising those he accused of denying Ukraine's pursuit for peace. The Mexican leader told the Mexico-Ukraine Friendship Group via video on Thursday there are some leaders who have not visited Ukraine once and who have not seen what the brutal Russian aggression brought. Some of those leaders, he added, sought to achieve some sort of populism by saying that Ukraine is supposedly not ready to go for peace. The speech was Zelensky's first address to Mexican legislators since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. It came in the wake of controversial comments from Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who attributed the war to decisions made by two countries, seemingly implicating Ukraine in Russia's decision to invade. On Wednesday, Lula walked back those remarks and denounced the violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity. Brazil has sought to position itself as a peace broker between Russia and Ukraine. Similarly, Mexico has shown it will remain neutral in the ongoing war in Ukraine, refusing to join sanctions against Russia. Mexico has nevertheless backed numerous United Nations resolutions that favored Ukraine, including a condemnation of Russia's attack in March 2022 and a text in October denouncing the attempted illegal annexation of territory. In Thursday's speech, Zelensky thanked Mexico for its backing at the United Nations, but he pressed Mexican legislators to show leadership in pursuing peace and pushing Russia to withdraw its troops. On more stories, in Africa, RSF announces 72-hour ceasefire in Sudan. Sudan's paramilitary group, Rapid Support Forces (RSF), has announced it will shortly commence a ceasefire despite continued heavy fighting with the army in the capital, Khartoum. The RSF said in a statement it will observe a 72-hour ceasefire which will come into effect at 6 a.m. on Friday, which marks the beginning of the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Fitr. The statement said the armistice coincides with the blessed Eid al-Fitr and to open humanitarian corridors to evacuate citizens and give them the opportunity to get their families. Khartoum was hit by heavy shelling in the early hours of Friday, with the RSF accusing the army of staging a sweeping attack on the capital. In the north of the city reported an exchange of fire between the RSF and the army a few minutes before the paramilitary truce was supposed to start, according to reports. There was no word from the army on whether it will observe a ceasefire. There have been a series of failed ceasefires since the violent power battle broke out last weekend between the army under General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the RSF, which is led by General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo. The two men were formerly in alliance as leaders of Sudan's ruling military government. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres was among prominent international leaders who recently called for the warring factions to observe a 3-day truce over aid and allow civilians to reach safety. At least 350 people have been killed in the fighting so far. Thousands of civilians have fled Khartoum and great numbers of people have also crossed into Chad to flee fighting in the western region of Darfur. The United Nations Refugee Agency said the vast majority of those who had crossed the border into Chad were women and children. They have fled seemingly overnight with nothing, UNHCR global spokesperson Catherine Mahoney said, noting that the Sudan violence signaled a pretty significant displacement crisis since there were already more than 1 million refugees in Sudan even before the army and RSF began fighting. Concerns over more military crackdown in Tunisia. Rachid Ghannouchi finds himself behind bars this week, leaving the Tunisian opposition leader's daughter worried for his health and his party worried about what happens next. Yousra Ghannouchi said, detailing her father's initial interrogation on Monday, they insisted that he can be held for 48 hours without lawyers present. Tunisia's President Kais Saied had chosen one of the holiest nights on the Islamic calendar to make his newest move against the Tunisian opposition, the 27th of Ramadan. Ghannouchi was detained and the offices of his self-described Muslim Democrat Ennahda party, as well as the opposition coalition National Salvation Front, were shot. The ostensible reasons for Ghannouchi's detention was in a video in which he made comments cautioning about the potential for civil war if Tunisia's various political currents, including political Islam and leftists, were excluded. The authorities have responded by charging Ghannouchi with conspiracy against state security and have kept him in prison on pre-trial detention. Yousra Ghannouchi said her father's words have been taken out of context to create the charges. My father stated that one of the main successes of the National Salvation Front is to go beyond political and ideological polarization. Anyone imagining Tunisia without this or that group, a Tunisia without Ennahda, without political Islam, without the left or any of its components, will be laying the ground for civil war, Yousra said. Tunisian political essayist Hatem Nafti said Said used the opportunity of Rachid Ghannouchi raising the prospect of a civil war to justify his arrest, one that had been used to crack down on the opposition under Tunisia's former leader Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. Ben Ali eliminated the Islamists under the pretext of preventing a civil war, said Nafti. Said's supporters have also seized on the comments. I'll take a break. When I come back, I'll bring you more stories. Stay with us. Welcome back. Here are stories from Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari okayed suspension of Adamawa REC. The President, Major General Muhammadu Buhari, retired, has approved the instant suspension of the resident electoral commissioner of Adamawa State, Mr. Hudu Yunusa Ari, pending the completion of an investigation by the Inspector General of Police, Usman Baba, into the conduct and actions of the REC during the recently concluded controversial supplementary election in Adamawa State. The President has also directed the immediate probe and prosecution, if found liable, of Yunusa Ari by the IG. The Director of Information, Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Willie Bassi, revealed this in a statement on Thursday night, according to reports. Bassi said also the President has directed investigation by the IGP, Director General of the Department of State Services, and the Commandant General of the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps of the role of their officers in aiding and abetting the conduct and actions of Yunusa Ari, and if found culpable, appropriate disciplinary actions should be meted out to them. Autumn hits back at Buhari over statement. Samuel Ortom, the Benue State Governor, has once again accused President Muhammadu Buhari of involvement in the killings in the state. Similarly, the Southern Kaduna People's Union, SOKAPU, yesterday accused the federal and the Kaduna state government for allegedly refusing to arrest and prosecute bandits terrorizing communities in the southern part of the state. Yesterday, relatedly, Bayelsa State Governor Senator Doyi Diri directed security agencies to clamp down on violators of state's anti-open grazing law. Ortom made the allegation in a statement in response to an earlier statement by spokesperson of the president, Mr. Garba Shehu, who had accused the Benue State Governor of thwarting efforts of the federal government in addressing the killings in the state. According to him, the statement from Shehu was a betrayal to Benue people. Ortom, in the statement signed by his chief press secretary, Nathaniel Ikor, said Shehu Garba's infantile statement on the security situation in Benue State has once again confirmed our position that the killings and mass murder in Benue by the Fulani militia has the full endorsement of the Buhari government. According to the governor, through Shehu's newest statement, the presidency clearly demonstrated that he was right when he consistently accused the APC-led federal government of complicity in the killings orchestrated against Benue people by the Fulani headsmen as allegedly represented by Mieti Allah Kautal, Fulani Nationality Movement, FUNAM, and other Fulani socio-cultural groups. Between 2015 and this year, Ortom has constantly held security meetings and assembled intelligence to support security agencies operating in the state. He has, however, consistently pointed out that the security agencies are grossly underfunded and deserve to be better equipped and motivated to tackle insecurity in the country. Governor Ortom is performing his duty as governor of Benue State and will continue to do so until May 29, 2023, when he leaves office. We anticipate the outgoing president to also do what he was voted to do for Nigerians. Meanwhile, SOKAPU has accused the federal and the Kaduna state government of allegedly refusing to arrest and prosecute bandits terrorizing communities in the southern part of Kaduna state. President SOKAPU, Uwemi Maisamari, made the accusation at a news conference in Kaduna. The SOKAPU president also lamented the silence of Amnesty International AI, the Economic Community of West African State ECOWAS, the African Union AU, the Commonwealth of Nations, and the United Nations UN over the program going on in southern Nigeria. Mai Samari said in the past 6 years, about 63 Atiap communities had been attacked and hundreds of people killed by invading armed herdsmen without a single arrest and prosecution by the authorities. Ironically, scores of Atiap leaders have been arrested and put in jail over trumped-up charges in the violence in which they are the victims, he said. He further said the freshest of such attacks was on April 15, 2023 in Runji village, Zangon Katef local government area, where armed herdsmen attacked the community at about 1 a.m., killing 33 people, mostly women and children, and burnt over 40 houses. And finally on the news, 1,262 Nigerian students trapped in Sudan. Nigerian students totaling over 1,262 have appealed to the federal government to evacuate them from the Republic of Sudan, where a fierce military crackdown between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary group Rapid Support Force has claimed 330 lives with 3,200 injured. Adam Mohammed, the Secretary General of the National Association of Nigerian Students Sudan, who said this on Thursday, lamented that many students had run out of food. The clashes had also displaced thousands of civilians who fled the capital, Khartoum, even as some foreign nations, including Japan, Uganda, and Tanzania, had started evacuating their nationals as the violence, which started on April 8th, entered its 12th day on Thursday. Until recently, the Sudanese armed forces led by General Abdel Burhan, the RSF paramilitary group headed by General Mohamed Dagalo, were allies. They worked together in 2019 in a popular uprising that overthrew Sudan's brutal dictator Omar al-Bashir, who ruled the country for 3 decades. After the coup, a power-sharing government was formed made up of civilian and military groups. The plan was for the interim government to rule Sudan for a few years and oversee a transition to a civilian administration. But in 2021, al-Burhan had become chief of the power-sharing council, dissolved it, declaring he would instead hold elections in 2023. The ongoing fighting broke out between the army and the RSF as a result of failed negotiations over integrating the two forces ahead of the intended restoration of civilian rule. There was disagreement over which general will be subordinate to the other and how fast the RSF will be incorporated into the Sudanese military. Heavy fighting broke out on April 8 with the cities of Khartoum and Omdurman being turned into battlefields. Though two ceasefires were agreed upon by the warring factions but failed to stop the violence. However, yesterday, the Secretary General NANS in Sudan, Mohammed, said no student had been hurt in the course of the war, but he lamented that students were experiencing food shortages, electricity outages, and telecommunication blackouts. Mohammed revealed that he had written to the federal government about their situation, adding that moves to evacuate the stranded citizens were in top gear. He further disclosed that 1,262 Nigerian students have filled out the evacuation forms as of Wednesday night. A recap of major stories says Russian warplane mistakenly bombs Belgorod. Indian court acquits all accused in Naroda Gam massacre. 5 Indian soldiers killed in Kashmir attack. French leader meets Xi Jinping in Beijing, and Zelensky addresses Mexican lawmakers, seeks support. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Tureki. Have a blessed weekend ahead.